Sitting is resumed. The time for questions to the Minister of Education. Question 4 and 6 have been withdrawn. I call Cara Hunter.
Question 1, Minister, please.
Mr Speaker, the Education Authority, as proposer of the development proposal to establish the new Causeway Academy, is proceeding with its implementation. The new Causeway Academy will open in September of 2026 and will operate across the 3 existing sites. The EA is currently working with the school's principal designate on the configuration of the 3 sites. The approach will be student-centred, with the objective of minimising movements for students throughout their post-primary school career. It will maximise the educational experience and achievement of all students, whilst also allowing exam year groups to complete their education on their current sites. Students will also benefit from a familiar environment, understanding established routines, relationships and support systems on their current site. A communications plan is in place to provide updates to current and prospective pupils, parents, staff, governors and the wider school community at key times. While there was support amongst stakeholders for a single-site solution for the new school, the cost presented to me of approximately £20 million were simply not affordable within my department's current capital budget envelope. Costs in support of the outworking of an approved development proposal are usually modest, connected with rebranding, signage, toilets and modest additional accommodation. And whilst it's not ideal, newly amalgamated schools will, in the main, operate on a split-site basis until it secures a place to advance in planning under the Major Capital Works programme following a call for applications. These £20 million costs were not expected or anticipated when the development proposal was approved, and my department has never had such a significant day one costs arising from a development proposal or committed to such significant day one works without the full rigours of a Major Capital Works call for projects.
Minister, this school was described at the time of its proposed amalgamation as a flagship school for the whole island, yet we have delay after delay. We have Board of Governors, interim Board of Governors resigning, and we have 3 school communities really feeling abandoned. Minister, I've spoken with their principals. Can I ask you today, when will we get the funding for a single-site campus, or when will those plans begin?
I understand the frustration, but also the ambition that exists for this school to be delivered in a new build setting. But as I outlined, when the development proposal was approved, it was not anticipated that there would be a £20 million capital requirement in terms of trying to get a day one solution that would have provided for a single site facility being catered for. The department is under considerable financial challenges with a significant number of major new capital bills and school enhancement programmes, as well as the special needs provision that has to be given the first call on expenditure. I'll continue to make the case for funding to my executive colleagues in terms of capital expenditure, but what I want to make sure is that the work continues, and that is happening with the current arrangements in terms of an interim Board of Governors, a principal designate, that we can provide the best possible opportunity for this school to operate on a 3-school site basis. But obviously I share the ambition for a single site solution for the future, but it is with those significant financial challenges that we are somewhat constrained.
Bradley.
Speaker, thank the Minister for his answer. Can the Minister detail the communication strategy that's in place for the 3-school campus model?
Can I thank the member for the question? And Mr Speaker, Mr Bradley has been a vociferous campaigner when it comes to advocating on behalf of the 3 schools concerned, and very clearly wants to get that single site solution. He has made that clear to me on a number of occasions whenever he has made representation on behalf of his constituency, and I know he'll continue to unapologetically advocate on behalf of the schools and in particular getting this single site solution up and running. Obviously the communications approach we will continue to engage when it comes to the Education Authority. They proposed the development proposal to establish the new school, so they're taking forward that approach. There is a Causeway Academy newsletter which has been issued to staff and parents, and that provides milestone updates for the new Causeway Academy. A plan is in place to provide further updates to current and prospective pupils, parents, staff, governors and the wider school community at key times. And the EA will be working with, and continues to work with, the principal designate on the configuration of these sites for the opening of the new school on the 1st of September of 2026. When this has been confirmed, the principal designate will then issue the relevant communications via newsletter, and also there will be social media posts in that respect. So I commend Mr Bradley for the work he continues. He has expressed to me his concern, obviously, and understanding of why one of the schools, in terms of the withdrawal to do with the interim Board of Governors. I want to get to a position where all of the stakeholders are able to engage in this, and that's something we'll continue to work towards.
Mr Speaker, Minister, to date, the handling of the amalgamation of the 3 existing schools by the EA to form Causeway Academy has been extremely poor. What commitment will you give to find a permanent single-site solution for this school, and will you commit to attending a cross-party meeting with the principal designate and local MLAs to try and resolve the list of outstanding issues ahead of the opening in September 2026?
Mr Speaker, I've engaged on this issue, not just within my department but with the Education Authority as the proposers of this new school, and also with their responsibility in taking forward the capital requirements in respect of the £20 million that was indicated for the day one costs associated with the single site. I'll continue to engage on this issue, but what I say to members that when this decision was taken, it was not anticipated by the decision maker at the time, it wasn't me, that there would be this cost associated with finding a single site for day one. It's not unusual. There are other schools who are operating on split site solutions as we continue to work towards providing a single site facility. But if we really want to address the capital needs that exist, not just for the proposed new Causeway Academy, but I have 114 projects. They're already within the major capital programme. 42 of these projects have been completed, 6 though are currently on site, 14 are in technical design stage, 14 are in early design stage, and 38 are either at a feasibility stage or else are on hold. The projected time frame to complete this current list is decades, and that's before we would add in Causeway Academy. So if members are serious about providing solutions, and I believe that they are, then we need to have an executive allocating capital funds based upon those priorities, and I can then take forward the demands that members rightly have on behalf of their constituents. But we can't do that if funding doesn't follow what people are articulating in this Assembly chamber.
Orla Flynn.
Mr Speaker, question number 2.
Officials are working through the necessary checks on the schools which have self-nominated, and I'll be making an announcement soon, and it's my intention to issue then a written statement detailing the primary schools which will participate in the pilot exercise for the covered outdoor sports space provisions.
Thank you, Concollia. Minister, you'll remember when we were out in Bunskull Football First, having the conversation around the lack of outdoor space, and particularly the high level of SEN pupils that are within that school, but which are in many of our schools at the moment. And some of the feedback from the EA is that health doesn't seem to be at the table more broadly when it comes to special educational needs support and specialised services in our schools. Just maybe if you give me some feedback on if you're aware of those issues and what's being done to try and support our SEN pupils.
Mr Speaker, I am aware of those issues, and it's a cause of deep frustration on my part. Indeed, I would be concerned that the increased financial pressures that are being placed on my department are as a result of a withdrawal of services when it comes to some of our health trusts and the Department of Health as they seek to try and mitigate against their projected overcommitment. Schools are having to pick up the pieces, but in my view, where we have children that require additional support. That hasn't just to fall upon the shoulders of the Department of Education and our school leaders. We need our health professionals being empowered by the trusts and the Department of Health to support them. Schools are there to provide an education, but where there are increasing medical needs and complexities, we need the Department of Health to step up. My fear is, and indeed a number of principals have raised this concern, that they are stepping back. I think that's a retrograde measure and one that I've raised my concerns in respect of this.
Alan Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, what criteria were applied to applications for the pilot exercise for the provision of outdoor covered sports spaces?
Mr. Speaker, obviously I hope to be able to make announcements on this soon. There was a call for applications which issued in August this year. It went to all primary schools seeking to be considered in the pilot exercise. 213 schools responded for inclusion in the pilot exercise. I think that indicates the level of demand and need that there is, but we're only going to be able to take forward around 10% of all of that in terms of being able to have an effective pilot scheme for that. So of those 20 projects, my officials have advised schools that the initial pilot will be drawn using an element of random selection for those that have been submitted, and I want to ensure that there is a mix of school sectors in terms of urban, rural, and also when it comes to enrolment figures. And my officials are working through the necessary checks in terms of how the criteria will be applied through that process, but I would hope to be able to then make an announcement shortly.
Justin McNulty.
I would thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Minister, in light of the recent University of Ulster report, Sport is Not a Luxury, which revealed 85% of parents believe sport helps children manage stress, yet sadly cost is preventing many children from participating, will you commit to introducing a statutory minimum of 120 minutes physical education per week in all schools to support children's mental health and reduce inequalities, and to allow every single child to have the opportunity of being part of a team?
I'll do my best to link it to the question. So when it comes to physical literacy, that is an important aspect of the school curriculum, and in order to achieve the 120 minutes of physical education that takes place, particularly when it comes to outdoor activity, principals have raised the issues around the lack of facilities to do that. And so this pilot scheme is designed to provide, for some it may be a covered outdoor area which can then protect it from the elements, and then that means you can have some of your physical activities taking place. But the point that the member makes is one that I share. I think sport is hugely important for our young people to be engaged in, not just for their physical benefit, but it has wider benefits to do with their overall well-being. It creates great opportunity for social interaction, leadership skills. You create a wider network of friendship and peers within a school setting. All of that helps you to feel part of a whole school community, which then within the classroom setting has a benefit towards your educational academic attainment. So the member is right to highlight this issue. It's one that I share in common cause with them, and this pilot scheme and the work that I'm taking forward in this area, but also when it comes to provision in our post-primary sectors for synthetic pitches, football type pitches, is also to try and provide the appropriate school estate that's needed for the physical education curriculum to be delivered more effectively.
Connie Egan.
Number 3, please.
Mr. Speaker, the guidelines on school uniforms follow the provisions of the School Uniforms Bill, which passed final stage here in the Assembly on the 13th of October. The bill will come into operation on the day after it gains royal assent, at which time the duties on the Department of Education to issue the guidelines and lay them in the Assembly, as well as the duty on schools to adhere to these guidelines, will go live. While the bill is awaiting royal assent, I instructed my officials to issue a copy of the guidelines to schools to assist them in making sure that their uniform policies are compliant for the 26-27 school year. The school uniforms guidelines, therefore, issued to schools on the 12th of November of this year, and I also instructed officials to provide a copy to the Education Committee on that day.
Egan.
Thank you, Minister. In the guidelines, excessive costs is defined as higher costs than a lower income household can reasonably be expected to afford. As Minister, can I ask, what do you think is reasonable for a low income household to pay for a child's uniform in post-primary school?
Mr. Speaker, there's 2 points in respect of this. The first is that we are consulting when it comes to a cap. We took the provision within the legislation that we could introduce a cap. That could be made up of 2 component parts. Either we set a financial limit or we will set a limit on the number of items that would pertain to the uniform provisions within a school, or it could be a hybrid model, it could be both. That is something that we will move to consult upon in terms of what that would look like. But we were prudent. We took the powers in primary legislation that then when we would want to introduce that cap, having carried out our proper due diligence, we will be in a place to do that. But this bill that was passed by the Assembly now gives legislative underpinning to the guidance which we have enhanced. But the guidance was already there. Schools were already aware of what they should be doing. Now they have to do it because of the legislation that was passed. And at the very core of that legislation was affordability. That was the number one issue that came out whenever we consulted with our stakeholders. It was all about affordability, and that was the key aspect which has to now be central to schools as they develop their school uniforms, as they carry out their review of that, as they consult with parents, with pupils and all the various stakeholders. The transparency associated with that must demonstrate how they have taken into account the underpinning principles around affordability.
All for it.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Minister, how has legal advice and the view of schools informed the guidelines?
So we had sought legal advice on the draft guidelines throughout the process. The guidelines have been tested for its workability through focus groups that we had with teachers and parents in June. This highlighted that there was a need for some further legal advice at that time to ensure that there was clarity and that the guidelines were going to be workable, delivering for both parents and schools. That legal advice resulted in the updated guidelines that were set out in a clear manner. Some feedback on these has been provided by principals recently, and the guidelines updated where this was appropriate. Ultimately, the guidelines must follow, though, the requirements of the bill, and the guidelines do follow the legislation that was passed. So, to assure the member, there was legal advice sought throughout this process that has informed the way in which the guidelines have now been produced.
John Burrows.
Would the Minister agree with me that it is very frustrating that some parents report that schools do not permit children to wear coats to school and then provide somewhere for those coats to be stored? And that's a very practical concern coming into winter.
It is an issue that constituents have raised with me, that when it comes to the wearing of school coats, a priority seems to be given to having your school uniform and emblem on display, as opposed to the inclement weather and the need for children to be and young people protected from that. That is something that I think schools do need to reflect upon. What is important is that our young people can get to school, and that when they are in school, that they are comfortable. They are not comfortable if their uniform is saturated as a result of the weather. So I think on that one, if there are any schools who are prohibiting their young people from wearing an overcoat, and they are insisting that they should only be wearing a school blazer and not protected from the elements, that is something that is wrong, and that they should put that right.
Dan Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 6. Question 5.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, if I could answer question 5 and 8 together. Since the Independent Review of Teacher Workload panel was appointed in May of 2025, they have undertaken a structured programme of work with the aim of submitting a final report by the end of November. This has included a review of existing reports and work streams taken forward by the Teachers Negotiating Committee, and direct engagement with a range of stakeholders. The panel has also conducted benchmarking exercises with officials in neighbouring jurisdictions to assess comparative approaches to teacher workload management in order to gain a comprehensive understanding of the key workload issues and, more importantly, the steps that could be taken to address them. The panel wrote to boards of governors to seek written submissions on the workload position in their schools. In addition, they issued an engagement questionnaire to all teachers and school leaders in Northern Ireland. Over 7,500 responses to this questionnaire were received. Mr. Speaker, the independent panel is currently finalising their report, and I look forward to receiving this in the next few weeks.
Armstrong.
Thank you, Minister, for the answer to question 5. Can you, Minister, give me an assurance that you are committed to delivering the recommendations from the panel in their entirety?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't obviously prejudge what is in the report in terms of those recommendations. I'm looking forward to receiving the report. It was at my request that I commissioned this panel to be established. It came about as a result of the discussions to resolve industrial relations when it came to teachers' pay last year, and also the connected issues around workload. And in order to find a way through, I recommended that we would set up this panel. So given that I commissioned this work, I have gained the involvement of the key stakeholders, in particular the trade unions. I look forward to receiving this report, and I very much will want to take recommendations forward that are contained within it. But I can't prejudge what it says, and obviously we will need to review what those recommendations actually say. So I am certainly wanting to implement. That is the direction of travel, but I need to await obviously what is contained within those recommendations.
Melissa McHugh.
Just Minister, I'd also like to sort of comment that the workload agreement that it will be delivered, and it will have the confidence both of teachers and of unions. And with that in mind, Minister, can I ask you if you're in a position yet to provide an update on teacher pay talks for the forthcoming year?
Mr. Speaker, I can update the House in that respect. The financial year for teachers is different to, for example, health workers. It doesn't run from April to April. It runs from September to September. So therefore, the point at which that crystallises is not the same in some of the other public sector organisations that we have to deal with. The workload aspect was one part of the agreement from the last discussions. That's why it's an important part of getting that received, so that we can look at what measures could be taken forward. But I also want to move to a position where we can make a pay offer to our teachers. That's why I've already had work carried out within my department, but also within the executive, that when it comes to the financial requirement for teaching staff, which we have costed in the region of around £37 million, that funding would be made available from within the executive. And so as the monitoring round follows the Chancellor's statement next Wednesday, I trust the Finance Minister will then bring a paper to the Executive. Contained within that, I expect an allocation to be provided that relates to teachers' pay. That is the case that I have made. That would then allow me to move forward in making, through the appropriate structures, a formal offer. And I would want to get a resolution to that before the end of January, which is the cut-off point for these discussions. If I can move earlier and get this resolved before Christmas, that's my intention. That's the basis on which I'm operating. But we need that monitoring round to provide the funding, because there are significant financial pressures in the department and EA which are well documented. But that should not come to the detriment of the teachers getting an appropriate pay increase.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, considering the findings of Stranmillis College's Centre for Research in Educational Underachievement, which found teachers in the Irish medium sector are working far in excess of agreed limits, largely driven by the constant need to create and adapt resources in the absence of sufficient and suitable Irish language materials, what new actions can you take and will you take to ensure manageable workloads?
So, Mr. Speaker, in that respect, we are taking forward a bespoke Irish medium strategy, and contained within that will be an element related to workforce. That report that was produced by Stranmillis will inform the outworkings of that particular strategy document. So those issues will be considered and looked at. I'm not in a position to outline to the member today what the outworkings of that would be, but they've certainly made the case in respect of the needs within the workforce. I'm taking that forward in terms of looking at that through the Irish Medium Education Strategy, which I would hope to publish then in due course.
Neil McAllister.
So far, teachers' workload, of course, is a very important issue. Important because it is having an effect on having a private and family life too. But that issue of workload is also important for children. And so I want to ask the Minister whether his department now or in the future would seek to do a review or work into the actual workload, particularly when it comes to homework of our very young children, because there is a disparity right across Northern Ireland and in our schools, and it is having an effect on children and family life.
Sure.
What I would say to the member, and I think she highlights the disparity or the differences that exist in some schools, and I think that is right. Different schools will take different approaches to the volume of homework that maybe is issued. But as part of the Transform Ed work, we're reviewing the issues around curriculum. I've indicated that is to provide a narrower curriculum that allows much greater depth and understanding to be achieved. One of the issues that our young people are really struggling with is a very broad curriculum that only skims the surface of the subject matter, and then they're having to catch up, and there is a need then for a lot more work. By reviewing the curriculum and taking the approach that the experts are recommending in this area, that will have a knock-on benefit for young people in terms of the pressure and workload. Aligned with that is the work at qualifications, and I've said before in this House, we are testing our young people from years, in old money for me, 4th year, 5th year, lower 6th and upper 6th. But for 4 years there are significant examinations that are being required, and that puts additional workload in terms of revision practice, mock preparation, examinations, and as part of looking at the qualifications, we need to ask the question about the relevancy of what those qualifications will look like, aligned to a reviewed curriculum, but how does that also impact on the amount of work that our young people are dealing with? So I think the member raises an important point, and the answers to that, I think, will be multifaceted, and there isn't one single answer that's going to resolve that, but I think the direction of travel that we're moving in terms of Transform Ed will be to the benefit of our young people and also our teachers.
Stephen McLaughlin.
Can I thank the member for her question? I have issued a draft early learning and childcare strategy now to my executive colleagues for consideration. Once agreed, it will be published for public consultation. The strategy will build on the significant investment of £80 million already allocated by the executive over the last 2 years, which is already making a positive difference for thousands of children, their families and providers. One of the most successful initiatives has been the establishment of the Northern Ireland Childcare Subsidy Scheme. This scheme has resulted in real savings for parents, with a 15% reduction on registered childcare costs and potential savings of up to 32% when combined with the tax-free childcare. Eligible working parents have saved now almost £18 million since the launch of the scheme in September 2024, and when combined with the savings from the tax-free childcare, parents in Northern Ireland have saved now an estimated £38 million. I've funded the increase of 2,500 more preschool places to full-time, with the provision of a free school meal for eligible children, with further increases planned for September next year. Additional funding has also been provided to support children from facing disadvantage, and a range of programmes supporting children with additional needs or disabilities. These initial actions are an integral part of the strategy and provide the foundation for further progress to support our children, families and the early learning and childcare sector. And I want to encourage stakeholders to respond to the consultation once issued. These comments will be used to inform the final version of the strategy and delivery plan.
Ms McLaughlin.
Thank you, Minister, for that answer, and I'm delighted that the draft strategy has gone to the Executive. The deadline you promised was autumn, and that's almost about to pass, and families are still waiting for the support. Given this strategy will take at least 12 weeks consultation, it could be April before we actually see a real start. Can you explain why, perhaps, that the Executive isn't moving more quickly in that, and how quickly will you overcome some of these areas, perhaps of disagreement, in order to get that consultation out and start supporting families?
Very brief answer, please, Minister.
So, Mr. Speaker, first of all, can I thank the member for the question. The members also met with me, and our party leader also met with me before schemes were developed. That helped to inform the process that we were following. It was a manifesto commitment by my party, but it's not exclusive to my party. It is being delivered through the Executive, and I just want to put on record my appreciation for her work in this area. Can I say, Mr. Speaker, aligned to developing this strategy, and it is there. Now it's submitted to the Executive. We have an Executive meeting on Thursday, so I would hope that it will be on the agenda to allow this to get out for public consultation, to get that feedback. I will then turn it around very quickly in order for it to align with the budget process, because some of the proposals within this do require additional finance, and therefore that needs to be informed by the budget making process within the Executive to allow an allocation to be made in order to give effect to some of the recommendations that I want to see taken forward.
Moving to topicals, Cara Hunter.
Minister, we live in a changing world where many of our young people have unfiltered access to smartphones and to social media, both inside and outside of the classroom. They're exposed to never-ending content of unrealistic beauty standards. In a recent question, I wrote to you, Minister, about would you consider implementing programmes regarding resilience and self-worth in our schools, and you have said you have no plans to do so. Minister, would you reconsider this and move forward with a mandatory curriculum, perhaps through the LLW module, to improve pupil well-being?
Mr. Speaker, I think the member highlights the challenges, particularly of mobile phone devices in our schools. That's why last summer I moved and produced clear departmental guidance on this, that primary schools should not have phones even coming in, and in post-primary those phones should not be used from the hours of 9 to 3 until you've left the school. That's why I've also taken forward the pilot scheme in 9 of our schools, and I was in St Ronan's in Lurgan, one of our largest schools in Northern Ireland with 1,600 pupils, and the feedback that they provided me has been one of appreciation for the opportunity to have those magnetic sealed pouches, but that it has been the single most transformative act that they have taken as a school to address issues around behaviour, issues to do with concentration, and also the well-being of young people. And I think that is something that whenever we get the evaluation, which is being carried out independent by King's College in London, if my instincts are right and the initial feedback is reflected in that report, I think that will demonstrate that this is something that we need to take very seriously, because the benefits that will come from minimising mobile phone usage in our schools will be transformative, particularly when it comes to the well-being of those children and young people.
Hunter.
Speaker, we don't agree on much, Minister, but I'm glad we both agree that smartphones don't belong in schools, so that I welcome that. Currently in the South, Minister, just referring back to my initial point about instilling confidence in our young people, there are school projects which commit their time to 11 to 17-year-olds, teaching students to be critical about media influence and building self-resilience and self-worth. But currently in the North, there is no mandatory curriculum on this issue. There is no specific class, no compulsory module for every school to provide this education. Minister, does that concern you? And if so, would you consider changing it or reviewing it or looking at it further?
Sure.
Mr. Speaker, the member raises an important point, and this morning I met with three dads whose daughters all committed suicide, took their own lives. And the challenge that they presented to me was what is being done in our schools to try and talk about these really serious issues when it comes to mental health, well-being, but also addressing suicidal ideation. And I was very much struck by the testimony of those three dads who spoke about their three daughters who tragically lost their lives due to suicide. During the course of that meeting, I was able to relay some of the work that we do carry out within education and health. There is a framework in place, there is support that is available, but the member rightly highlights that the learning for life and work aspect of the curriculum doesn't provide the necessary support for our young people. It's why Lucy Crehan, in her independent review of our curriculum, found that it wasn't effective, recommended that it should be broken up, and that there should be a clearer way to provide support within our curriculum on a number of areas that LLW had addressed, and within that it includes the well-being of our young people. I gave an assurance to those 3 dads this morning that I very much would be wanting, as part of the review of that subject. There is a subject working group, as with all subjects, as part of the curriculum review that is being established. We have practitioners that are being appointed to provide support across every subject, including LLW, that mental health, well-being and suicide should be part of the work of that particular subgroup, looking at that aspect of our curriculum, because I believe that we need to do more in this area, and it's one that I'll be giving close attention to.
Tony Ford.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, less than a year ago I was in Fort Hill Integrated School in our own constituency. Senior EA officials have since been out, and you yourself have visited the school. But ETI have recently, the recent inspection confirmed what parents, staff, pupils all agree and all know, that it's a fantastic school community, but the buildings are not fit for purpose. They've identified serious health and safety risks for pupils. So can the Minister, following that ETI inspection, set out clearly what immediate actions his department, working with EA, are doing to ensure that pupil and staff safety has not been compromised?
Speaker, the member's right. I know the school well. I have visited the school. I know it was subject to an inspection. There are a number of action points that need to be taken forward now as a result of that inspection, not just related to the actual physical capacity and build. So that's something that I know we'll continue to monitor. But he rightly raises the poor condition of the college. It requires work, and whenever I visited the school, I gave an assurance to the school that the Education Authority would be looking at the various measures that need to be taken to address a number of the deficits associated with it. So I'll follow up with the member in terms of where that work currently is, in terms of what the need would be. It does come with, again, I relayed this earlier, Mr. Speaker, Fort Hill College is one of countless schools that are facing chronic maintenance backlog. Hundreds of millions of pounds is what we need in order to address schools which successive reports have said are crumbling, and that has a negative impact then on the delivery of curriculum within those school settings. So Fort Hill, like other schools, need to get the support. I can only provide that support, though, whenever the appropriate financial resources are provided. I will continue to make the case for that funding, and I would appreciate colleagues supporting me in securing that resource.
Minister, the costs are high, and the PAC recently, the report on that, the neglect over years has been phenomenal. But you'll be well aware that Fort Hill were promised a new school building for more than a decade, and your direction, that Fresh Start funding was removed as soon as the Assembly returned. But given the severe budgets that you've just talked through, can your department now confirm whether any of the current pupils that are at that school are ever going to see the new building in their term there?
I can't. And just to correct the member, I didn't take funding away from schools under Fresh Start. The United Kingdom government, whenever it came to the Fresh Start, they identified £500 million. They carried out a process for integrated schools to be identified for new builds. That money, whenever it came to some of those schools that had been taken forward, but then there was funding that was allocated to the Struil campus, shared education projects delivering for 4,000 pupils. And what was my response? Schools like Fort Hill and others that were left high and dry by the UK government, I brought in to my department's conventional capital programme. It is my department that continues to take forward the work on those. So far from what the member alleges, that I took money away, I stepped in to protect schools like Fort Hill. That was the action that I carried out, and I'll continue to make the case. But what I would like to see from the Alliance Party and others, when it comes around this executive table, are you going to prioritise prisons? Are you going to prioritise prisoners? and provide things like a canteen in McGilligan? Or are you going to prioritise pupils? I would say to the Alliance Party, give the priority to our pupils, and I look forward to your ministerial colleagues in the executive supporting me when it comes to our schools.
Robbie Butler.
You've destroyed his social media clip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister will be aware of concerns regarding the hiring of classroom assistants on temporary engagement forms rather than permanent contracts. A significant risk that has been identified is that many of those in temporary arrangements have not completed the necessary Access NI checks. Has the Department carried out an audit to measure the extent of the issue?
Can I thank the member for raising this, because I think it gives an opportunity to be able to put on the record what the current actual position is, because there has been misinformation provided and reported upon. Just to make clear, the figures that were recently issued to the Unite the Union in response to their Freedom of Information request related to temporary school support staff across the whole education system. In addition to classroom assistants, this included a range of other staff groups, for example, admin staff, cleaners, catering staff, instrumental tutors and EA headquarter staff. Unite the Union wrongly claimed that the total relates solely to special school support staff. At best, that represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the information. The Union then compared the overall system-wide figure to an earlier figure from January relating only to special schools and falsely claimed a 200% increase. That was another basic inaccuracy. Whatever the reason for that misrepresentation, Mr. Speaker, it does risk spreading unfounded fear among parents. So to be clear, figures cited by the Union in January related to 108 classroom assistants in special schools that were awaiting clearance, and today that figure stands at 14. Unite has therefore presented an 81% reduction as a 200% increase. The average turnaround time for issuing of Access NI certificates is 5 working days from presentation of all of the relevant paperwork. And the number of staff that are employed through a temporary engagement form, that will constantly change, and the total across the education system as of today is 173, and I think that reality reflects any large workforce that would require some temporary staff. So, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the member for allowing me to correct the record on this issue?
Mr. Butler.
Thank the Minister for his answer and for bringing some accuracy to the issue. Because the last thing we want to do is to cause undue alarm. However, the fact that the temporary engagement form regime still exists would leave some risk. Is the Minister content that that is a manageable risk, or will the Minister take steps to change that process, that no one will be working in schools without the requisite Access NI checks?
Mr. Speaker, the issues around Access NI was well documented a number of months ago. At that point, I did take action. I engaged with the Education Authority in respect of the alarming figures that were there. EA very robustly then engaged with schools, because it is schools who, as the employer, will bring in temporary staff. They have a requirement to ensure that the appropriate Access NI arrangements are in place. But EA also then made it clear that no member of staff who had not been Access NI cleared would be paid in order to ensure that there was priority given to this. And that addressed a significant backlog of hundreds of staff who had not been Access NI cleared, some for an unacceptably long period of time. Where there are a very small number that are engaged in emergency cover, and the application to Access NI has not been processed, in those settings they must have direct supervision by appropriate other staff who have been Access NI cleared. So that should only ever be in cases of extremity, and there has been significant work to address this issue around the Access NI clearing system.
Collier. Minister, my office has been working on behalf of a number of parents of school children of St Patrick's Primary School in Resharkin who have recently lost their concessionary travel passes, despite being able to avail of it in the previous number of years and despite the bus having capacity. So can I ask if there's a defined policy in relation to the removal of concessionary passes in a scenario where the bus has capacity?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of the particular case, but I'm happy to come back to the member in more detail on that one.
appreciate that, and I will forward the information to the Minister. On a similar vein, the EEA have resisted the request of parents to have the bus on the same route home stop at their childminder, but insisting on a bus stopping at their parental home, despite the fact that the parents are working and the home's empty. So if I could ask the Minister just what the defined policy is, and again, in that scenario.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, let me look into that for the members. At times, bus routes will have fixed locations where they have to stop, and the ability then to accommodate a different drop-off may be impacted through other issues, for example, ensuring that it's a safe drop-off point. But again, I don't know, but if the member wants to put in detail the issue, I'm happy to come back to him.
That brings to a conclusion the time for questions to the Minister for Education. Point of order, Mr McNulty.
Mr. Speaker, according to Standing Order 19, subsection 1A, a member may ask written questions of any minister on matters relating to the minister's official responsibilities. It is clear some ministers are in breach of that rule by answering questions with comments that certain issues that fall under their official purview are, in quotes, operational matters, close quotes, or that questions should be redirected to statutory government bodies within their department to, and I quote, make the best use of limited public resources. Can I ask the Minister for a ruling? Can I ask the Speaker for a ruling to stop ministers from trying to deflect and exonerate themselves from their responsibilities as ministers in answering questions to members who are seeking only to represent our constituents?
Well, there already is a ruling, and ministers are expected to answer questions. And I say this as a former health minister who, at that stage, I think had 6 or 7 times more questions to answer than any other minister, and we got through them. So I don't give any truck for ministers who are busy and all of that there. You take on the job, you take on the responsibility, you answer the questions. So it's very clear to me that the ministers are accountable to this House, and this House is accountable to the people of Northern Ireland. Get on with the job and answer the questions. There's a few small cases, particularly for the Justice Minister, where it is operational matters and some of that stuff goes through the policing board and so forth. But let's be very clear, those are the smaller number of cases. Ministers should not be farming it out to various arm's length bodies to answer questions on their behalf. Thank you. Mr. Tickeries, while we change the table.
Improved soil health, lower emissions, better water quality, restored habitats and a resilient food system, then it must be funded at a sufficient scale to meet those ambitions. These regulations set the right direction, but they must be backed by the right level of resources to support transition and change on farm. That is why achieving a multi-year budget is so crucial. Farmers cannot plan on one-year cycles. Environmental improvements cannot be delivered on one-year cycles. Long-term investment in genetics, technology, slurry storage and nutrient management requires long